with someone. So anyway, so the election today in Israel is, we don't know whether Netanyahu won the election yet or not. But one of the things that I want us to think about is the timing, I guess you could say, because this sometime after the election, President Trump's peace plan, that's supposed to be the plan of the century, they're calling it, is supposed to come out. Now, when will that be? The Arabs have been told that it will be sometime probably May 15th. May 15th is known among the Palestinians as the day of the catastrophe, and the catastrophe was the independence of the nation of Israel. So the nation of Israel declared independence on May 15th of 1948. And so this would be a treaty. And now, and one of the things I thought about is I wanted just to talk about a little bit tonight as we started. The remark was made last week, or a question was asked about the time of peace between the confirmation of the covenant until the abomination of desolation as being the time of peace. And so I was listening to an audio book this week. I, in fact, listened to part of it twice. And almost all of them have it as that it will be confirming a peace treaty for 7 years and then breaking it in the middle. And that, so it's always called a peace treaty, and say that the first 3.5 years is a time of peace. And so I tried to look that up. Well, where does that come from? And I can't tell you where it comes from, but what Jesus said about it was that it will be a time known as a time of sorrows or birth pains upon a woman with a child. It's the beginning of sorrows. And so when you read about it in Daniel chapter 11, it makes it real clear that 3.5 years is filled with war. That this supposed peace treaty that will come out, if it is or if it does not confirm the covenant, it nevertheless will probably be the beginning of war, not the end of war. In fact, there will be a lot of war because of it. So that you could almost imagine that war is in the offing as that comes about. And not only that, it's not that he confirms a peace treaty for 1 week, but notice what it says in Daniel 9:27. He will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. Now, we've discussed this a lot of times, and we have discussed why that word that's used there is that he will confirm. The word make is translated here, but it's the word confirm. He will confirm a covenant with the many for 1 week. And so later, from here on out, this is called the Holy Covenant. Now, if this were a peace treaty that was made between the Antichrist to be and the nation of Israel, would it be called a holy covenant, or would it be called an unholy covenant? It would be an unholy alliance. It could be called a lot of things, but a holy covenant, probably not. But from here on out, it will be called or referred to as the Holy Covenant. And in Luke, it tells us that the Holy Covenant, the only place that term is used other than in Daniel, it tells us that the Holy Covenant is referring to the covenant God made with Abraham to give him the land. So we've talked about that quite a little while. So what we're looking for is the confirmation of the covenant to confirm that the land has been given to the nation of Israel, and that being recognized for 7 years. Now, there's a lot of articles that we could read about that in the press, that and they're saying that they're talking about a 10-year that this treaty or this covenant, confirming the covenant, will be for 10 years, is what Jared Kushner is saying. So that doesn't match the 7 years. So we'll have to see how that plays out and how that works when we see the details on it. But the main thing that I wanted us to go back and look at that, because of the fact that in the next few days to a month, we should see some progress, some movement on this. And so it's important that we, in our minds, are not confused, because we need to understand it doesn't say a peace treaty, it says confirming the covenant, or make a covenant with the many for 1 week, according to, in the New American Standard. But in the actual Hebrew, it says confirm the covenant with the many for 1 week. Okay, and now, as we've talked before, Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. We looked into that quite a little bit last week. Later now, that's referred to twice. That's the first time there in Daniel chapter 9:27. And then the next place is Daniel 11 and verse 30, where it says, ships from Kittim will come against him, therefore he will... Yes?
I was going to ask last week, who is Kittim?
Kittim is Cyprus. Cyprus is where the British Navy is docked. That's where they ship out from. Is,
where they got both ends of the Mediterranean.
Yes, yeah. Well, I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, to exercise control over the Mediterranean Sea, they have both ends of it.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so there's a big Navy base in Cyprus. And he will be disheartened and return and become enraged at the Holy Covenant. I talked to you last week about the fact that the word enraged is used here, also used in Revelation. They're talking about enraged at the woman. And notice again the words Holy Covenant. It's a holy covenant. Why? Because God is a party to the covenant. And so you can confirm a covenant that God has made and it be a holy covenant. But if you make a covenant, it doesn't become a holy covenant, because for the most part, we're not promised keeping God's to be holy. It has to do with God. And so notice that in chapter 11, verse 30, he uses the word holy covenant twice. Enraged at the holy covenant, and then show regard to those who forsake the holy covenant. And then in verse 32, chapter 11, verse 32 of Daniel, by smooth words he will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant. So he's enraged at the holy covenant, shows regard for those who forsake the holy covenant, and then in verse 32, he will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant. So now he's actually taking action against the holy covenant. We will, in this study, I wanted to get into quite a little bit of detail as time goes on about the people who know their God, who will just display strength and take action, as it says in verse 32, and those who have insight among the people. I want us to look at that because it has a lot to say about the Great Tribulation. But for now, I want us to go forward a little ways. Now, a couple of things you'll notice about this king in chapter 11, verse 36. The king will do as he pleases, and he will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods, and he will prosper until the indignation is finished, for that which is decreed will be done. When does that happen? Notice that it says, then the king will do as he pleases and exalt and magnify himself. So it's in his personality at that point, but as at the time of the abomination of desolation, there's an event that's going to take place. We're going to look into what is that? What is the event that takes place and that causes him then to begin to exalt and magnify himself above every god or so-called God and all of that. That's Daniel 11:35, 36. No, that's 36. And then verse 37, he will magnify himself above all. I mean, all the gods of his fathers and all of the other things. And we find the same attitude in Daniel chapter 7 as in Daniel chapter 11. But and we'll also see it in Revelation, and we'll look at that a little farther as we go now into Revelation. I wanted us to notice the different names that it has for this one who is called, in Daniel chapter 9 verse 26, he is called the Prince who is to come. The people of the Prince who is to come, it talks about, the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy Jerusalem anyway. But here, Now it's talking about, and that, as we get into Revelation chapter 12, and I want us to look at chapter 12 and 13, and that's where we're going tonight. So that's kind of where we are. Revelation chapter 12, beginning with verse 10. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and power and the kingdom of our God and the accuser of our Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down. He accuses them before our God day and night. First of all, he's called here the accuser of our brethren. We looked at this last week. They overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb, word of their testimony. They did not love their life even when faced with death. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. But notice he's called the accuser of our brethren in verse 10, and verse 12 he's called the devil. The devil has come down to you. In verse 13 he's called the dragon. The dragon